Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar on closing education's digital divide during the coronavirus fight. I'd like to introduce Scott Imhoff, who is Cambium Network's SVP of Product Management and Planning. Scott, I will pass things over to you at this point.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Appreciate that. Good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening. I appreciate you joining Cambium Networks on such short notice, but today's times require quick action. The backdrop to today's presentation and discussion started on Friday when a group of colleagues at Cambium were debating what we could do given the situation and how we might best support our partners, our customers, and our communities. We came up with a long list of ideas and took the action over the weekend to think through those and reconvene this week to progress further. And as it happened over the weekend, on Saturday morning, I happened to be checking a community board, the Animal Farm Users Group, and was pleasantly surprised to find a like-minded individual, Steve Jones from MaxWire, who was positing a almost verbatim output of one of our ideas, and that is, how do we bring broadband to students who are now expected to do remote learning when they didn't have sufficient broadband in their homes? How do we make that available to them, and some ideas around how to do that, and they align very tightly with our ideation at Cambium Networks that previous Friday. So over the course of the weekend, Steve and I exchanged thoughts and ideas, and eventually got engaged through his contacts with a local school district here in Illinois to progress the idea to reality. And that's still a work in process. And at the end of this presentation, I'll give you a quick update on where we're at. But the idea was to flesh out what worked and what didn't work, and some of the challenges that we might have as we progressed. But what we wanted to do with you today is share the ideas at a reasonably high level, and what we're finding is working and what's not working, and some considerations around them. So with that introduction, let me go ahead and get started with the content itself. And what I'd like to start with is just some basic statistics. So today in Illinois and in other communities across the US and Canada, primary education, secondary education, and universities have gone to remote learning. And if you think about that at a global level, there's over 770 million learners worldwide right now. In the US, about 15% of the households have school-age children, and that's grade school, junior high, high school age students. And the reality is that they're experiencing very disrupted environments right now. Their education is being disrupted within the current term, and there certainly could be implications into the coming term next year. And the question for us is how quickly can we make adequate broadband available to students and teachers who have insufficient broadband access for successful remote learning? And when we were talking on Friday within Cambium, the focus was really much on teachers, and that evolved over the weekend to the very good point that's not just students, it's teachers. I myself have two teachers in my immediate family, and they're gearing up to provide that remote learning. But if they don't have adequate access, then clearly that's going to be problematic, and an inability to reach their students. So we got to contemplate this not just with regards to the students themselves, but teachers. We arrived at two high-level concepts, and there's pros and cons to each, and I'm going to walk through that. But our first idea is what we have now called drive-in public Wi-Fi. And the idea is to bring public access Wi-Fi to public spaces, and in particular, the schools themselves. The second is a bit more traditional for wireless internet service providers, and that is the use of fixed wireless broadband to bring broadband to homes that are underserved or have no adequate broadband access today. There's a lot of homes out there that statistically are counted as having broadband access, but that's via oftentimes 4G phones and tablets. And that certainly works for for periodic internet surfing. It may even work short term for streaming content. It may work for uploading and downloading on a tethered laptop, but really not a sustainable solution for extended remote learning. We have to bring sustained broadband access to these homes that don't have adequate access to meet that educational objective. So let me talk through these in a bit more detail. So in the construct of the drive-in public Wi-Fi, our thought is to extend the school's local area network to outside the building. And if you think about schools, particularly high schools, they have generally large parking spaces relative to the community that they're in. It's an opportunity for students with a driver to go to those schools, connect to the school's intranet directly, upload, download files, perhaps participate in a short streaming experience, to be able to do some surfing while they're there, etc. And in that environment, it's a safe environment. They don't need to exit the vehicle. They observe their social separation, and they're able to engage with the school and the educational opportunities that exist there. And it's a relatively straightforward exercise. It requires the school to extend the LAN to a point-to-point link, perhaps on the roof of the building or adjacent to the building. Use that wireless point-to-point link to a tower-mounted outdoor Wi-Fi AP. That Wi-Fi AP could be mounted on a light stanchion. It could be mounted on a temporary tripod. We've been informed by one of our education customers in Texas that they're contemplating using buses to park a bus in the parking lot. They can use the bus's AC network to drive both the point-to-point link as well as the Wi-Fi AP itself, and it gives a nodal point that visitors to the parking lot can park around. What's nice about this is the students can use their existing credentials to access the network, and the school's governance applies. To drill into that just in a little bit more detail, so lots of publicly available space, and I mentioned this in the context of schools, but it could just as easily be the community's libraries. It could be administrative offices of the local government. It could be a AAA ballpark for that matter. But basically, where you have the opportunity for a large number of vehicles to park and access that outdoor Wi-Fi AP network. It's rapidly enabled. This is something that can be deployed with receipt of equipment in a matter of hours and be brought up quite quickly for these students. The backhaul and the point of presence that the school has in place already for their local area network can be leveraged, and it's there, it's present, it's of sufficient capacity to serve that school, and in all likelihood, any of the visitors to that drive-in Wi-Fi experience. This is important, and well, it's important but not critical, and that is the governance of the access, to ensure that the student has access to what they should and not access to what they shouldn't. And as I said, desired but not critical. But one nice thing about extending the school's local area network is that governance is in place, and the students will have direct access to the important material and focused on that material, and not often running into the wilds of the internet. The drive-in Wi-Fi is certainly, as I mentioned, appropriate for uploading and downloading and relatively short streaming sessions. However, it's really challenging for real-time sessions. You have to be there during that session. It may be crowded. If that streaming session, if you have back-to-back sessions, it would require you to be in a vehicle for an extended period of time, which may or may not work really for a conducive environment. You got to have a driver. Not a problem. Well, it may be a problem, but in high school, a little bit easier to deal with. But if it's grade school or junior high, there's going to be a driver that's involved, and therefore may not be the most convenient or viable option. and in some cases where the communities go into a strict quarantine and limit travel, it doesn't work at all. But it's a great way to get started. It's very quick to deploy and provides immediate access to the students in the community. Moving on to a bit more of a traditional model, but leveraging new assets perhaps, is taking advantage of the schools themselves as sites for point-to-multipoint networks, the master site or the hub site, if you will. And if you think about mini schools, they include gymnasiums, and those gymnasiums provide some vertical height. You can mount a 2-meter or 3-meter non-penetrating roof mount antenna on top of that 2-story or 3-story gymnasium and really get some vertical height out of it. Now, having said that, schools aren't traditionally wireless internet service providers, so the cooperation and collaboration with WISPs in that community would certainly make this go much faster and easier. But you extend the local area network of the school to the rooftop, to that point-to-multipoint network, in Cambium's case, the EPMP 3000 or a PMP 450 network, and you deploy the subscriber modules to the need-based students in the community. What's interesting, and we found this as we go through our proof of concept, is grade schools, not in all communities, but in many communities, grade schools are more neighborhood-based. And the students are generally within walking distance of that grade school, and that grade school gives the opportunity to kind of reach the immediate surrounding area of the school. In our case study, there's 7 campuses, a high school, a junior high, and 2 junior highs, and a number of elementary schools that make up the 7 campuses. And by leveraging each of those campuses, you create a coverage area and then take advantage of bringing broadband to those need-based homes. Now, there are some considerations here as well. Clearly, it's the best broadband service that we can provide to the residents. You take advantage of the school's backhaul and point of presence that's in place already. Again, you get the governance that's in place in the educational institution in terms of the sites that they can visit, the access to any content behind the firewalls, etc., and the access privileges are in place, which is fantastic. It does allow for the streaming and real-time sessions that will be most ideal in this situation, and perhaps even more so than the drive-in Wi-Fi networks themselves. However, it's going to take time to build these sites. Not a great deal of time. They can be built relatively quickly in those temporary environments and then enhanced over time. The rooftops, while I'm highlighting the opportunity to take advantage of that asset, it's not a 100-foot tower. It's not a 200-foot tower. So you won't have as great a vertical height as you would ideally like. So you may not be able to reach as many homes as you would like. But still, it's a positive expansion and extension of that network. The other challenge, and you really have to look to the school as a partner to do this, is identification of those in need. Now, we're using CN Heat to do the coverage modeling, and then we're doing reverse lookup to identify addresses. But due to privacy, we're turning those addresses over to the school itself, and the school can do the cross-reference to identify the students that are in need that they're communicating with through their network with the addresses that we have coverage for. But you do need to identify who are the homes that need that coverage. And then, of course, at the end of the day, we do need to do a subscriber installation. We're looking at how we might facilitate self-installs, especially in a temporary fashion, using audio tone for alignment and some straight up guidelines and guidance instructions to do that, but there does obviously need to be subscriber installation that takes place. I mentioned CN Heat. This is a tool that Cambium introduced in 2019 and is being used by a number of WISPs from a commercial perspective, but really comes in handy in the case of enabling remote access for these students, in that we can very, very quickly model from the school rooftops and also from the WISP's existing sites what coverage might look like, and we can derive the addresses of those homes that are now covered. Just as an example, we were able to do CN Heat coverage models and do the address lookup in less than 24 hours when we got started with the school district that we're collaborating with. Now, the reality is, given the school's locations, how effectively we can get coverage from those rooftops, it's not likely to be adequate. And our community WISPs across the US and Canada are a tremendous asset at this point in time. And the ability to leverage those networks to serve these students shouldn't be forgotten. It will supplement that school-based network coverage. It leverages the existing assets that are in place. With coordination with the schools themselves, you can put a VPN in and effectively apply that same level of governance on the sites that can be visited and the resources behind the firewalls that the students should have access to. There's a supplementary benefit that if the home doesn't have adequate access for remote learning, it probably doesn't have adequate access for work at home initiatives. So there's a secondary benefit for the family and for the community as a whole to support those work from home initiatives. Now, if you bring on a relatively higher number of subscribers with the work at home and remote learning, you may require supplemental access at those sites. The incremental demand on those sites may dictate additional backhaul capacity, and those are two things that certainly need to be contemplated as you work through this exercise. The other thing not to forget, and this was brought to our attention by Steve, is that's great that you brought broadband to the home, and we can run the Cat5 cable inside, and there you go, you're in business, right? But the reality of today's devices is they likely don't have RJ45 connections on them. They may be Chromebooks. They really need a Wi-Fi connection, and you need to contemplate provisioning a home gateway of some sort, and likely remotely managing that home gateway on behalf of the home itself. In Cambium's case, we have the R195 or the R190, and CM Maestro allows that remote management. But as you contemplate helping these local school districts extend their networks, think beyond simply bringing broadband to the home, and think about managing, well, providing and then managing in-home distribution of that Wi-Fi or of that capacity via a Wi-Fi gateway. Some higher level considerations to think through. Certainly 5 gigahertz is present and available, but those of you that are familiar with the industry, particularly in suburban and urban environments, 5 gigahertz can be congested. We're somewhat fortunate in that the FCC has just opened up the CBRS band, the 3 gigahertz CBRS band. It's approximately 150 megahertz of spectrum, and of that, approximately 100 of it is largely underutilized at this point in time. It's clean and it's available and can be exercised. It brings on the additional advantage of better propagation than 5 gig in terms of foliage penetration, and it'll help reach more homes from those school rooftops than 5 gigahertz will. So within the possibility of your communities and your networks, think about leveraging that 3 gig CBRS spectrum as you move forward. I mentioned earlier access layer capacity, and what I wanted to highlight is that when you bring additional subscribers per sector, each additional subscriber has additional demand in and of itself, and the aggregate demand, and we're seeing this, and I'm sure the network operators that are on the line are seeing this, is that demand is popping at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's rolling right through 5 p.m. Maybe there's a little dip at the dinner hour, and then it's ramping back up with your media streaming in the evening as it has in the past. What we'd encourage you to contemplate is updating your ePMP and your PMP access points that are deployed to take advantage of multi-user MIMO. The existing subscribers in your network stay in place and take advantage of those 2x2 subscriber radios. but by replacing the access point itself, you get a substantial lift in capacity, anywhere from 1.5 to 3x capacity by simply updating the access point itself. The ePMP 3000 and the 450M both have higher performance characteristics, receive sensitivity, etc. So you'll get not only the advantages of multi-user MIMO, but some enhancements on the smart antenna technology and the radio sensitivity itself. On the backhaul side, as you drive capacity to those sites, backhaul will likely be the next challenge on your checklist. E-band radios may be a good option. Those are multi-gigabit radios. You got to be sensitive to the range that they provide. You can model the 850E, the PTP 850E in Link Planner and look at range and performance trade-offs. You can contemplate link aggregation, aggregating multiple microwave paths to increase capacity from the site. If you're not taking advantage of XPIC, that's an immediate opportunity to where the radios support it to increase capacity. And beyond that, certainly 2+0 and 4+0 configurations can provide you that incremental capacity that's likely going to be required. I want to give you a quick update on where we're at with our proof of concept. As I mentioned earlier, serendipitously connected with Steve and MaxWire on Saturday, and we've been progressing. We're collaborating with the school district here in Illinois as our proof of concept. As I mentioned, 7 campuses, roughly 2,000 students. We've completed the sea and heat study, and we'll be provisioning that today. It covered both the schools as well as MaxWire's existing sites. We have the initial E500 outdoor Wi-Fi APs in transit, should be delivered this afternoon, and we would expect initial installations on Friday and then build out from there. We're looking to finalize bill of material for the point-to-multipoint networks today, and I would expect delivery or deployment of those to commence early next week. It so happens in Illinois that most of the schools gave students an unexpected week of holiday, and then many of them are rolling into a week of spring break. So depending on what school district you're in, you have 1 to 2 weeks of time here to get things sorted out before those students come back and are looking for that remote learning opportunity. We have authored an application note that reflects much of what I've presented here in this session, but with a bit more detail. And it's intended to be used both with the school administrators and the WISP themselves to encourage that collaboration and coordination between the school district and the local WISP to advance those e-learning opportunities. To help, and this is evolving as we move quickly, but Cambium Networks is going to be introducing a series of, I guess for lack of a better word, promotions, but some economic incentives to assist with this exercise, and this is targeted specifically at that education space. Just to roll through them real quick, both, well, on the sea and heat front, we're going to be providing free sea and heat coverage models for a school district. We've got 2 different types of outdoor Wi-Fi APs, one on the CM pilot line, the E700, and then Xeris, which joined Cambium in 2019, has a fairly significant footprint in the education space. They have an outdoor Wi-Fi AP as well. We're going to be moving those both into market at basically buy 2 get 1 free pricing. Xeris also has a rapid deployment kit, which is a self-contained, robust tripod to host APs on. We're putting that into the market at an aggressive strike price. To help bridge from the school building to the parking lot hosted Wi-Fi AP, we're putting forward some aggressive pricing on bridge in a box, and also the utilization of our Force 300 subscriber radios in a point-to-point configuration to provide that wireless bridge from the school's rooftop to that AP. And then evolving, and more to come on this front, we'll be bringing out some promotion pricing on the point-to-multipoint gear, particularly the ePMP Force 300 subscriber radios. And for those communities in WISP that can take advantage of the CBRS spectrum, we're going to waive the SAS fees associated with those students' subscriber radios. At the end of the day, it really requires a great deal of collaboration and partnership. Cambium is standing up to be one of those partners, and we're looking for our WISP community to be a partner, and of course the school districts themselves. We very much want to see what we can do to help those students and those teachers make the most of the situation and minimize the disruption in their learning experience over the coming weeks and possibly months as we move through this COVID situation together. So Olivia, I'm not sure if there's questions that are popping up, but if you can read the questions off, if there are any, I'd be more than happy to take those. And then we can certainly post the slides and the presentation itself.
Yes, there are a few questions that have come in so far. So the first one says, does Cambium develop roof access points for point to multi-point that would have power supplies for from car batteries? This would help for an ISP to temporarily deploy a new site via a van with access points on top.
We Cambium do not, but that's an excellent question and suggestion, and it's really one of the reasons why we wanted to get this session out sooner than later. We need to capture those kinds of observations and thoughts. So I'll take that as an action item, and we'll start to look at our the broader ecosystem, and we will identify recommended AC/DC converters that would support our solutions. Good question. I appreciate it. Thank you.
The next one is asking about Cambium considering E-rate funded broadband services that schools have purchased, and if there are any issues with the approach that we're exploring given E-rate's legal requirements.
So we do support E-rate and have been active in that program. Another good question. I don't know if Bruce Miller is on. He might be able to answer that question immediately, or I'll get the answer to it and come back. We did flag E-rate as something that we needed to be thinking about. We're not clear on whether E-rate funding would support this or not, but we will certainly track the answer down to that. Another good question. Thank you.
The next one asks, will Cambium be offering additional PEs for education customers?
Yes. Again, things are moving fast, and I just moved through those promotion pricing pretty quickly, but we're trying to make it as efficient as we can on the commercial side. But I would encourage you to work with your account manager, either from the connected partner, Cambium connected partner, or from Cambium, and we'll do what we can do to assist on a case-by-case basis, in addition to the standard promotions.
The next question asks, are there any resources from Cambium for partners that need help with designing a school or region-wide deployment?
There is. Certainly our regional technical managers can assist with that. We have some system architects that are market-facing that are actually actively involved in this proof of concept. We're going to embed their experience in this application note, which will be evolving. So we'll publish the application note either late today or early tomorrow, and then we'll just continue to refresh it as we go through the learning experience and some of these questions get answered that are being asked. But yes, Cambium does have resources, and encourage you to reach out to, again, your account manager, either through your connected partner or directly to Cambium to lever those resources.
The next question asks, can you tell me who are Xeris's distributors in Peru?
In Peru, I do not know the answer to that. If we can capture that name, and again, I can't tell if Bruce is on or not. Olivia, if he is, maybe you should light him up. He might know that answer immediately, but we can get that point of contact out to whomever's asking the question immediately.
I don't believe he's on right now, but we'll get that question to him.
Okay, if whomever asked the question, if you could just, my email address is scott.imhoff at cambiumnetworks.com. Maybe you can post that, Olivia. I'm not sure how that works. But drop me an email and we'll get you the answer to that question immediately.
Yuri commented that Wincom is the distributor for all of CALA.
Oh, there we go.
That looks like it's about it for questions. Oh, one more just popped up asking what is the throughput range in your solution?
So that is the classic, it depends. So it will really depend on the specific environment that the networks are deployed in. The Wi-Fi, the E700 is a Wave 2 4x4 solution as an example. So if you're in a open parking lot, you're going to get really exceptional throughput, again, depending on how many devices are loaded on the network at that point in time. So it really depends, and we can help model that with CN Heat and Link Planner to give predicted performance on the networks themselves.
Those look to be, oh, there's one more. When does the 3-month free SAS access start? Post-deployment or once gear is live or once purchased?
Once the SaaS service clock starts, if you will, once the device is enabled in the field, not when the device is purchased. So as an extreme example, if you buy a subscriber a radio for CBRS applications and it's on the truck for 90 days, the clock's not running. But once that radio is enabled and on the air, the clock would start. And we would start the 90 days at that period of time. We're presuming that we, from a remote learning, we'd expect it to be reasonably quick, and the 3 months should carry them through their school term this year. Okay, well, thank you all for joining. I realize it was very short notice, and some of these things might seem relatively simple to you, but what we're trying to do is spark the thought, and more importantly, spark the conversation between the community WISP and the community school board to make sure we get broadband access to these students so they can continue their remote learning. Thank you all. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thanks, Scott. We'll get a recording of this webinar out to the attendees on the Cambium Networks community forums. Thank you for joining us and have a good day.